Lest we forget, there once was a dream that refused to be forgotten. It was the dream for a nation's unity, a dream for all to be equal and to be at peace under the African sun. The hope that this dream sparked became a journey, and that journey became a struggle. The struggle of a society bleeding for fairness and equality to be served. This is the story of an institution that has become a monument to social justice as it answered the cries of its people. This is the story of the struggle and the CCMA.
I think I ought to tell you about what it was like in the trade unions and in the working class areas during the period when the liberation movement was active and there were no trade unions recognized by the government insofar as Africans were concerned.
You know, even when we belonged to the associations, we were not allowed to form unions.
It was a period when the nationalists had come to power, the ANC was growing, the trade unions were active in campaigns.
It was a fight between the whites and the blacks.
Issues that drove unions at the beginning was more about their existence and the struggle towards their existence. Later, it was about their recognition, and later it was about the collective bargaining.
Ultimately, what we're looking at as unions, we're also looking at the issue of political freedom, economic and social freedom, you see. So that's why as unions, we were the platforms for political parties, you see, right, to mobilize, freedom fighters, to mobilize, the protest marches and so forth, right.
So it was a very exciting period for young activists in the country, but also a very dangerous period. I mean, during that period, a lot of people lost their lives, people were abducted, people disappeared.
And as a result of that, you are then forced to recruit and intensify different struggles in different areas.
And we organized strikes, we organized demonstrations, we organized campaigns for changes in wage patterns.
We have a vision of South Africa in which black and white shall live and work together as equals in conditions of peace and prosperity. Oliver Tambo.
The Vienna Commission in 1979 made certain recommendations, for example, to allow black workers, African workers, the right to organize and join unions, which was unheard of before then.
We believed that the only way we could liberate the country was through organizing the working class.
The labour movement played, I would suggest, a significant role in the process of change.
If we could succeed there to build non-racialism, we would succeed as a country.
Despite the fact that we had bargaining councils, industrial councils and industrial courts, we didn't have an institution that can conciliate and arbitrate matters quicker.
Workers were not given a proper hearing. They were more often forced to end up fighting the cases in the industrial court, and that was another problem because of resources.
It was very expensive. Industrial court, you have to find a lawyer, you have to... it was a long process. It was a very, very long process.
It seemed as if change would never come.
In fact, we felt, look, in order to create peace, all parties should be accorded an equal status, in fact, you see, to deal with their issues.
And there was a conscious decision taken that we were going to set up and argue for the establishment of an independent Chapter 3 constitutional organization. It would be funded by the taxpayer but be independent of government.
It was the beginning of a new era.
The dust barely settled under the feet of a striding new democracy. It was time again for a new phase of change to adorn the face of the South African labour market.
CCMA became a critical tool to reduce tension, to bring about social dialogue in a meaningful manner.
That has got them accustomed to operating on a rules-based and values-based system.
The CCMA has certainly brought an idea of justice in the workplace.
If I have a right, you also have a right. And at the same time, the rights that are there goes hand in hand with responsibilities.
But there are times when compromise proves elusive and stakeholders revert to more forceful means to make their voices heard.
In this country, we don't have the maturity of social dialogue. We are not yet there.
I can't recall who it was, but there's someone that said a riot is the language of the unheard.
So we're sitting on a time bomb, in my opinion. We're dealing with very serious poverty in the country.
And the increasing violence that one sees in strikes is I think, a symptom of how much is at stake.
Where both parties have exhausted everything at their disposal and they want to put a particular pressure, the only weapon that they have is a strike from the employee side.
I don't think the strike is an answer. I believe in negotiations, and I think the CCMA should be called in before such things happen.
Development cannot take place without peace, you see? So CCMA, it's central in creating peace. Make no mistake about it. And I'm saying it's central.
It's about building institutions of civil society that are going to be here long after we're all gone.
It's an art, handling this relationship between reconciliation and transformation. Thabo Mbeki.
The CCMA comes in where we play a institutional role to assist parties who are in dispute.
We are not there to impose the settlement on the parties, but we're there to bring reason.
The CCMA assists in creating stability in the workplace.
The CCMA is probably one of the best examples that we have of true democracy at work in South Africa. It's run by a governing body made up of the social partners, organised business, organised labour and government.
The CCMA has played a very significant role in ensuring that people understand they have the right to complain, that they have the right to understand why they're there, and on the same basis that they've created a sense of fairness, and that's the important thing that we need to do.
The quest here is for truth.
I think the CCMA is pretty skilled, and its commissioners are pretty skilled at achieving this.
Commissioners have to independently apply their minds to the merits of the case and consider the facts and the evidence as is presented to them at the arbitration hearing.
So we put in a huge amount of effort into refocusing and realigning the education of commissioners.
And today the criteria is very strict. The training is very vigorous and it is very structured.
Even if when a person is declared to be competent, training does not stop there because you need that individual to continue being trained. And as an institution, we are doing that.
And we believe that that's also our role, and it's our role adding back into society to assist people who might not have the opportunities to go to university and to go to things like that and to actually make sure that they develop.
So we're also then looking at international trends, to say internationally what's going on, what are the issues that we need then to draw lessons from and then improve our system.
And based on that, we've started slowly improving the quality of the commissioners.
The real task of reforming a stoic society lay at hand. The challenge remained how to meet the interests of both employers and employees, and in the same breath create a fair, non-discriminative marketplace.
Initially, there was a lot of hostility towards the CCMA from certain sectors of society.
They now realize that the CCMA can mediate for them.
The CCMA has moved to the center of the society where people, working people, feel that and employers feel they can come to the institution and receive a fair hearing.
You get your chief executives and your executive managers to your domestic workers and your farm workers that are all utilising the CCMA services.
Parties understand that CCMA understands our issues.
In the time that it's been around, it's become a very much recognised, trusted and believed in institution, and that people feel that they can go there and get fairness and equity, both whether you're an employer or a worker.
They see the CCMA almost as the rescuer of labour and labour relations in the country. I think that is great.
But overall, I think the CCMA has become better known. It really is, I think, a household name.
Every South African at some point in their life is going to end up at the CCMA, either as an employer, at least once, or as an employee who's been terminated and you feel that you've been terminated unfairly or you've been treated unfairly.
If you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. Nelson Mandela.
I think the main challenges facing the CCMA for the future is around capacity in terms of workload and being adequately resourced to do the really important work.
We have a huge task to perform in this country, but I think the amount of resources set aside doesn't meet the CCMA's needs.
We're now seeing a swing back to what was happening in the 80s, and a look to employers to try and see can they resolve some of the concerns in relation to workers, and worker voices turning back into using the workplace as an area for social protest.
Workplaces are still areas of battle. They are still deep tensions.
In this year's strike seasons and last year's, the rise and rise and rise of CEO and executive pay has caused a huge amount of dissatisfaction, and it's a huge issue on the negotiating table.
So we're constantly in a battle, but are we winning the battle under very sort of tough conditions? Yeah, we certainly are.
There's always room for improvement.
The CCMA has to take a curve and mistakes around which they should learn and improve itself on.
We still have pockets of weaknesses and areas we need to zoom in on, but I think overall we've succeeded in changing the mindset of unions and particularly employers.
I think the CCMA has definitely achieved what it initially set out to do.
As far as mediation is concerned, we have achieved enormous advances in settling very difficult wage disputes.
People, do they have access? Yes. Is it promoting fairness? Yes, it is promoting fairness, and justice is being seen to be done.
Essentially, it's saying this institution is credible. It's credible to employers, it's credible to government, it's credible to the unions.
But 15 years later, the CCMA has seen itself also feeding the labour market with competent and experienced, not only commissioners, but even the staff that works at the CCMA. They become educated as they handle the other people's cases.
There's huge potential for the CCMA to play a dynamic role way beyond dispute resolution.
What I see to be some of the key features in the revision of how we should do things is more about the dispute prevention. It's about educating the public about the CCMA.
I think in terms of the new labour laws, there's certainly a role envisaged where the CCMA plays a broader role in the labour market beyond its existing mandate, and that's particularly around capacity building and training.
For example, if we were to have a research unit within CCMA to basically then research trends in the labour market and then compare with the international trends, and on the basis of that information then share those trends with with stakeholders or the users.
In time, we shall be in a position to bestow on South Africa the greatest possible gift, a more human face. Steve Biko. The baton now remains firmly in the grasp of the CCMA that continues to strive to bring social justice to all the people of South Africa.
The CCMA has dealt with some really tough issues where parties have really had huge issues at stake and the conflicts have been intense. But the reality is that the CCMA works through that with the parties and it arrives at a solution at the end of the day, which sends people back to work, which makes businesses operate, and which is ultimately good for our labour market, it's good for our country, and it's good for our democracy.
So if we can cooperate with CCMA, we can raise issues, we can nurture CCMA, we can be supportive of CCMA, we can help it to improve, in fact, that will be great.
We need to cherish it and we need to help develop it. We need to use it and make sure that it's able to take us into the future.
Whether you're an employer or a trade unionist or a government official, for all those people have an influence over the lives of the majority of South Africans. Please place the poor, the vulnerable, the marginalized first.
And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. Utata Nelson Mandela.
The CCMA has travelled a long and evolutionary journey in the 15 years of its existence. It has had its own challenges, but I believe it has demonstrated that it is a place where both employers and employees can come as angry enemies, but depart as colleagues and know that they need to return to their workplaces and make sure that they build those workplaces to be constructive and beneficial places for both workers and employers. And that helps in building the South African economy. The CCMA has also, in its 15 years, developed and shown that it too is adaptable, responsive and versatile to the various conditions that are prevailing in the labour market, and it is able to deliver when these conditions arise. I am firmly of the view that in the next 15 years, the CCMA will continue to show and demonstrate that it is responsive, versatile and adaptive, and will deliver as required to the workers and employers of South Africa.